Hey, KU fans, welcome back to another episode of the KU Sports Hour here at KUsports.com with Benton Smith somewhere on your screen. He's on my left, but I'm not going to force that on you. Wherever you put him is where you put him. Benton,
Could be anywhere.
deal with it, okay? Just live with it. They're going to put you where they want to put you. Probably, since I still am talking, they've got your screen, your face on the whole screen and have hidden me. Wouldn't that make sense?
They'll probably put an X over my face to just not pay attention.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But anyway, Ben Smith, Matt Tate, we're here to talk KU's Big 12 opener this weekend against the Baylor Bears at Memorial Stadium. But before we do that, because it's the Big 12 opener, it seems like a pretty good time to throw some thoughts out about the new look Big 12. Benton, we haven't done that yet. We've both been busy and running around the globe. Or at least parts of the country. And we haven't really had a chance to sit down and talk about the official expansion that was made official last week. So your first thoughts, not only on the four teams that will be joining the Big 12 in the near future, but just the idea that after a long, long time of saying we're not expanding, in about 30 seconds, the Big 12 said, never mind, we're going to expand. Sorry about that. We have to survive. We're expanding. Here we go. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious, and that the fact that they did something different than what they were saying for years or whatever makes sense because the circumstances changed drastically when Texas and Oklahoma decided to go to the SEC. So once you lose those big money programs that draw those eyeballs and streaming numbers and all that stuff, I mean, you've got to react, or the conference was just going to disband slowly over the next few years or whatever. So the Big 12 did what it had to do to survive, so that makes sense. And I mean, given their options, I don't think I'm the first person to say this, obviously, but I mean, they got the best of what's available because you weren't going to be able to poach anybody from the SEC or Big 10 or Pac-12 or anything like that. So they obviously did a great job in bringing in these programs. Houston, I guess, is a little bit down the last few years, but I mean, it wasn't long ago that was one of the best, group of five programs around. And BYU obviously has a big brand and huge following nationally, and also lets you expand out west to where maybe in recruiting, suddenly it's a little more attractive for like players from California and the Pacific Coast to come play at your school, way out here in the Midwest or down in Texas, depending on where you're operating from. So, I mean, there's nothing but positives from this, especially when you think about kind of the potential for the recruiting footprint to expand for a lot of programs. Because, you're going out. I know Cincinnati isn't that far from West Virginia, but I mean, now you have two programs out in that area that kind of make you more of a presence as a conference out there. And now you have a program in Florida. I mean, that's huge. And obviously, there's potential for Central Florida to kind of take off as a football program too, because that's a huge university. And obviously, we've all heard for decades about the kind of football athletes that come out of Florida, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So, I mean, I think it does great things for the Big 12 moving forward.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I like the recruiting angle that you hit on there, because when you think about college football recruiting, when we're going to stick to football right now, because that's what drives this thing. Everybody knows that. You've heard it a million times, regardless of what you think about that. It is what drives this thing. But when you think about college football recruiting, what are the three biggest states? Texas, Florida, and Ohio.
Yep.
I mean, and you just added a program in all three of those states. Now, you didn't have to add one in Texas because you're already there, but adding, what is it, the fourth or fifth largest city in the country?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it does not hurt.
Metropolitan area. Yeah,
right. So that, I like the what you said about adding the best of what was available. When you looked at maybe in the couple of weeks leading up to how quickly this became final and official, you were hearing things like Colorado State, Boise State, South Florida. There were a lot of other names of schools, SMU being thrown around that could have been a factor in this expansion. And nothing against any of those programs, but I do think that the four that they decided on are far superior to Colorado State and Boise State and SMU and South Florida. I mean, what's funny is Central Florida today is what South Florida was about 15 years ago. And I don't really know the ins and outs of how that happened, because there was a time back when Jim Leavitt was the head coach and South Florida was sort of a brand new thing. There was a time where that school looked like it was going to go nuts, and they were competing at a high level and winning 10 games a year, and that just, they weren't able to sustain that. And now you've got Central Florida, a much bigger school, that seems like it's ready to kind of take that and run. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more, because I think it's fascinating. I'd love to find, and I'm sure there's plenty of people down there that could tell the story, but I'd love to find out exactly how that happened. I think there was a time when it looked like Central Florida was going to get left behind, and there was some animosity and jealousy, and now you fast forward 2 decades, and it's the complete opposite. So adding Orlando, adding Houston, again, adding Cincinnati, which is another big school. I'm sorry, big city. I just think that's the best you could have done, like you said, and I think that's not only the best you could have done, but I think that's what you wanted to do. I mean, you didn't need to go add Boise State and hope that worked out. I mean, you're adding Houston and you're hoping that works out, and the chances of that happening are so much better because of the growth potential and the money and the market and all of that stuff. So I think it's great. I think it's a very good foursome. I think for me, it's hard to kind of accept it, because I still believe that conferences should be aligned geographically. And so when you look at stretching from Provo, Utah, all the way down to Orlando, Florida, there's no identity there. It's not a conference. It's just it's just a conglomerate. It's just a group of teams that happen to have to love each other or hate each other. And so I'm not a huge fan of the way it all fits together, or if it even fits together. But I agree with you. Cincinnati coming in helps West Virginia. So does Central Florida in that regard. And so, there is from a recruiting standpoint and an eyeballs and a market and a time zone standpoint, there's an advantage to doing that too, or there could be. We'll see if there is, but there could be. So I think they should be commended. Whether you want to give Bob Bowlesby any credit or not, I don't really care. I just think the Big 12 as a whole, and whether that's university presidents and chancellors or ADs or Bowlesby or whatever, I think they all deserve a ton of credit, man. They found a way to survive when not very long ago it looked like it was over. And how many times have we said, the Big 12 looks doomed over the past 15 years? A bunch of times. But this one was the first time where I really thought it was, and they found a way to survive. And what that means 2 years from now, 5 years from now, who knows? But today, stable is a fair word, and I think there's some excitement around these additions and what this conference can be in the future. So very cool to see it happen so quickly. It really shows you that anything's possible, because a lot of times what they'll tell you about these sorts of things is that it'll take a while, and it didn't at all. I mean, they moved fast, just as fast as, faster really than OU and Texas did to get out of here. So now we got to see how it all.
The time frame makes sense though, because the Big 12 needed to expand, and those teams obviously would love to join a Power 5 conference.
Right.
That's why it moved so quickly, I think, because I think it was obvious for both sides.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, nobody was having to study this thing real hard. They needed each other, and it'll be interesting to see exactly when they come and when they go and all of that stuff. But it sounds like BYU in 2023, and then the other 3 in 2024. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that timeline's moved up a little bit. And then Texas and OU are sort of held hostage here until 2025, but that also wouldn't surprise me if they got out early. So a lot could still change, and a lot could be moving parts, so to speak, I guess. But I think that they've done well. I think that what's weird is that there's talk about, Bowlesby, I think, even flat out said it, like we may not be done expanding.
Right.
So what does that mean in your mind? Is that well, once OU and Texas are out, we need to add 2 more then, or does that mean add?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if the time frame matters necessarily. If you are just interested in bringing in more programs. Not a ton of programs make a lot of sense at this point.
Right.
So we'll see if that actually happens, if they become a Big 13 instead of a Big 12 or whatever.
Right.
But it sounds like Memphis was close,
There you go.
as close as anybody. And that kind of makes sense just from a football and men's basketball standpoint. So, but then like who else would you be bringing in? Because 13, you need an even number, I would assume,
Right.
just to make things work with scheduling and that type of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the Big 14 would look like. I think the Big 13 would make more sense in terms of like the brand of adding a Memphis to what you've already got.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many other names. I mean, I was just thinking about some others, and it's amazing to me how many people, even if they're just fans, were considering some of these schools. Like, I mean, I'm from Colorado. I
Mhm.
spent 10 years of my life living in Fort Collins. Still know and have a bunch of friends and family back there. But Colorado State, that does nothing for me in the Big 12. I mean,
Yeah.
like, and the people that say that could deliver the Denver market, well, first of all, not true.
Right.
Second of all, the Denver market is, I mean, the Denver market's great for the Nuggets and for the Broncos and for the
Yeah.
NBA and the NHL with the Avalanche, but there's not a whole, it's not a real coveted market for college athletics. I mean, even Colorado doesn't deliver very much out there, and it's partly because of the makeup of that state and how much else there is to do. So, that was one that struck me as odd a little bit. I don't know who else you would bring. Memphis makes a lot of sense. I agree with that. I think SMU would make some sense too.
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't know that you need to do that though, right? I mean, maybe that's the idea. You don't need to do that, but if you're looking at Boise or Colorado State or Missouri State, for God's sakes, I saw somebody throw that around. Like, yes, exactly. That's what my
What?
mind did. That's like, why? What do you? I mean, if you're going to throw those out there, then absolutely a program like SMU would make a heck of a lot of sense if you have to bring two. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. You were able to talk to Travis Goff
Mhm.
before that Coastal Carolina game down in Conway, South Carolina, and I know you didn't get him for a ton of time, but just what did you get a sense from him? I know you wrote the story, and most people
Yeah.
have probably read it already, but just the sense, the feel, the vibe around it, more than what he said. What was your impression of how he kind of viewed the future and where this was all headed?
I think that his sole focus is just making the KU athletic department even more attractive than it already is. And you do that by building up a football program. I think he knows that. I think he knows that KU football needs to generate a lot more money than it has been in recent years. And like, I mean, that's not new. Other ADs have come and gone in the past decade, and said that, but the hires they've made haven't made that happen. It remains to be seen, but it does seem to me like he found the right guy to build this thing in Lance Leipold, and he's going to give him time. He's not going to be like, okay, 2 years in, we haven't gone to a bowl. All right, let's move on to the next coach. That's not how he's going to approach this thing. So, I mean, he wants to build up the football program, and he wants to fundraise for this program and for this stadium, and make KU more attractive. And I think he didn't slam the door on the KU eventually joining another conference.
Right.
And he had the opportunity to when we spoke to him before the game on Friday. So I think fans should probably keep that in mind too. He didn't say this, but it seems like if he's able to really build up the football program and make it a little bit more attractive, maybe the Big Ten comes calling in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and all of a sudden, KU is moving on from the Big 12. Who knows?
Sure. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Like in
Because
order,
the Big Ten money would probably be better. Let's
no
be
question,
honest.
no question.
So
Yeah,
that's what you'd be bringing in more money for the university, and that's why you would do it.
100%. Yeah, I mean, in order for KU to go to the Big Ten has to want them. That's the bottom line. But the other bottom line is if the Big Ten ever does decide they want Kansas has to go. I mean, that's it just doesn't get more cut and dry than that. And I know that irks people because they want it to happen today. And I know it irks some other people because they just want this whole thing to stop and a little bit of a, let's just say we're stable for 30 years type of thing. But that is over. I mean, in my opinion, this is going to be a perpetual state of flux, right? I mean, like whether it's wholesale realignment or just, universities, power five, big schools, major universities with influence and big money, constantly reevaluating where they're at and if there's something better out there. I mean, I think that's why this thing will be perpetual. I think that's going to be how it's going to operate well into the future. And I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. Again, I know it doesn't do much in the way of traditional rivalries and the history of it all and preserving that kind of stuff. But the bottom line in today's world, sadly, whether you like it or not, is that money makes the world go round. And if you don't have money, you can't keep up. And if you can't keep up, you can't pay guys like Bill Self. And if you can't pay guys like Bill Self, then what do you become? To be determined, or maybe not. Maybe we'll never have to know. Maybe he'll be there another 40 years. I don't know. But that's the reason that money's so important. It's for those stadium upgrades. It's for paying your coaches. It's for facilities. It's for, again, continuing to present your university and your athletic department and your programs in the best light that you can possibly paint them in, so that the best recruits come in, so that you win, so that you're on TV, so that you go to the biggest games, so that you make the most money. I know that sounded like I didn't take a breath, but it's really simple. It's really simple to say. So I think he's doing exactly the right thing. And based on what he told you guys that were down there, that's right. I mean, it is continue to do what's best for Kansas. And what that is today doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it'll be in a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So talk about having the right guy in there. That's the guy you want leading the department. And then you believe in this football coach. And if you do, then that's the guy you want leading the football program. And then you watch it all start to head the right direction, trending upward.
Yeah. It's weird how he's not wasting his time with a reality show that can air on ESPN Plus.
That you know of.
That I know of. I guess, there could be one coming out in a few months, who knows, but he doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
He doesn't. What would you call it if you were gonna give it a title? What would you call it?
Is it just about golf, or is it about the football program, or what is it?
Hey, this is your show, man. You're the executive producer. I'll let you put whatever you want on it. I've got a title, but
let's hear it. Yeah.
Well, mine would be Still Miles to Go. I mean, it's
still miles to
right. Like, I mean, let's not. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There are still miles. Maybe it's miles and miles. Still miles and miles to go.
Yeah,
that's the one I would do. But there's got to be something with golf, right?
You could incorporate Miles Kendrick that way. He's kind of a co-star.
He'll be here forever.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you off the hook on your title. Let's move into this week's KU football game. 2:30 p.m. Saturday. A really interesting game because we've seen a couple of really interesting games so far. One that was a squeaker that Kansas won that didn't quite go as well as anybody hoped, but had a good ending. And the other that probably went better than a lot of people thought, but didn't have a good score associated with it. So what is this Kansas team through 2 weeks, Benton? Do we know? Do you know? Does anyone know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the work in progress that we kind of expected is what we're seeing. We knew just with the timeline from when Lance Leipold and the rest of his coaches got here that it was going to be tough to kind of hit the ground running when the season started. So I think they're going to, we've seen that, you have to rally late to beat South Dakota. And then there's some things that get better when you're playing a much better team at Coastal Carolina, but then your defense is also challenged a lot more because you're facing a completely different offense and a top 20 team on the road. So, there's going to be peaks and valleys with this thing throughout the year. And, I'm sure it'll change from week to week, what's working offensively, what's working defensively. And that's part of the process and part of the rebuild. So you're right that it's kind of strange that, you eke one out against South Dakota and the next week in the third quarter, you're within a score against a good team. So I just think that we're going to see some of those big swings, when they're able to have everything rolling on both sides of the ball. This team could potentially compete with some decent teams. And there's going to be other times when they're playing a team that, maybe they should be competing with, and they're not, just because they happen to take a step back, because that's part of the process.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had a chance to talk to both coordinators earlier today, and what struck me as most interesting is, they were breaking down the game, talking about the team, talking about philosophies, talking about the State of the Union, the whole thing. I mean, it wasn't just focused on this. But what I thought was really interesting is both Andy Kotelnicki and Brian Borland separately mentioned physicality as a big part of what they want to do. Borland, of course, flat out said it. I mean, we want to have a more physical mindset at all the positions on our defense. We execute okay at times. We're in the right spots at times, and we do what we're coached to do. But at the end of the day, that can't be enough. Sometimes you still have to find a way to get physical and just get after a guy through that, right? And so I thought that was a cool, honest assessment of where his defense is at 2 weeks in. And then when I asked Kotelnicki about kind of his understanding, I guess, of the Big 12 and what it takes to succeed in this conference, he said something that was wildly interesting. He said what he noticed as he studied this thing going back to late April when they found out they were going to get the job here was that there's a lot of good, talented athletes all over the field on both sides, but the ones that do it the best are the ones that are physical and still look fast and smooth, and you don't notice it. And I think that Kansas isn't there yet on either side of the ball, and you can't really get there overnight or even in a year. But that's obviously something that they're trying to achieve and trying to build toward, because that I mean, he's been here 3 months and 4 months, 5 months, whatever it is, 3 months, and he already understands that's what it takes. I mean, there have been coaches who spent 4 years here who didn't, whether they understood it, they might have understood it, but they never articulated it that well. And I think as soon as he said that, I was like, you picture some of those great Oklahoma teams or Texas teams, and a guy like Roy Williams, right, on the old D-back, not the old coach. A guy like that, or Derek Johnson when he played for Texas before he played for the Chiefs. I mean, those dudes were fast, crazy freak athletes, but they were so physical too that you didn't notice their physicality taking them down a notch. And KU's had some of those guys, but not enough of them. And I get the feeling that this entire rebuild is kind of built on that idea. Like, let's be that team. Let's go get as many of those guys as we can. And some of it's going to be develop those guys, right? They're not going to walk in the door that way, but you redshirt them, you let them build, you let them get their strength, you let them get improved speed and things like that. And then 2 years after being here, they play that way, or they are that way. So I thought that was really cool. I know that doesn't have a ton to do about this week's game, but I just think that's a really good look at where they're trying to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it shows up when you're playing a team as good as Coastal on both sides of the ball. That hey, the level of physicality that we've played with isn't going to cut it moving forward, because we're about to open Big 12 play, and it's another step up in competition. As good a program as Coastal has been the past couple of years, I mean, it's still a Sun Belt team, so you're about to see better athletes with this Baylor team coming in, and then obviously you got Duke, but then you're right back to Big 12 action going to Iowa State. So I mean, you're in for it now. There's going to be there's going to be physical players lined up against you, and are you willing to kind of meet them on that level and exert that type of effort the coaches are looking for? That's what's going to make these games competitive or not.
Good call. Hey, you didn't come up with a title for the Travis Goff series, but you did just come up with the title of this podcast. Yeah. You're in for it now.
You're in for it now.
That's the title, and I love it because it's absolutely accurate.
I've got one. Go Goff yourself. Does it make sense? It doesn't even make sense.
That's one I would have come up with, so I'm proud of you. I like it. Yeah. It means you've been around me too long, way too long. Sorry for you. No, I like it. I think what's the key to this week for Kansas? I mean, so this is a 14-point line in Vegas when it came out. It's been bumped up to 17 or 18 this week as the week progressed, but still that was lower than I thought it would be. And I don't know if that's fully because of KU gaining some respect from the way they competed last week. You flip on the final score and you just think they gave up 50 points and got their butts kicked. But if you watch the game, you realize they were more competitive than that shows. Doesn't matter. Nobody's trying to say that's a moral victory or anything like that. But Vegas matters. That kind of thing matters to them because they're trying to set the line to where they make money. And they believe that if they set this thing at 28 or something, KU would probably cover that pretty easily. So do you believe that? And what do you think will be the biggest key to Kansas staying in this game, whether they can win or not? Who cares? But just being in the game, what are you looking for?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to come down to how does that front seven for this KU defense handle what should be a physical kind of run game oriented attack from Baylor. You know, they haven't played. They played Texas State and Texas Southern, and they're just kind of keeping it simple, but they're also just racking up rushing yards. I mean, they've had 3 different guys go for 100-yard games already. They had 3 different rushers run for 100 yards last week, and so I mean, if KU isn't able to kind of step up to that physical challenge of, hey, let's take on these big Baylor O linemen, and let's have our linebackers, you know, take down the running backs, and it's going to be a long day. And I think that's probably going to be the key, because so far, I mean, I think the D line has looked pretty decent, especially on the ends, where you've got kind of your best players on that defense, maybe with Kyron Johnson and Malcolm Lee and those guys. But interior on the defensive line, where you're going to be at, what can your linebackers give you? They haven't, you know, been great so far. So, I mean, that's where you need to be physical, right? At the point of attack, and with your linebackers flowing in and being in the right spots and taking on good running backs. So I think that could be the key to the game.
How many points do they need to score to win it?
KU, how many points do you need?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd assume like 30.
Yeah,
you know?
at least, right?
Yeah. So that'd be something new too for
right.
KU.
I mean, that's the thing. As much as you focused entirely on defense there, which makes perfect sense, they still have to find a way to score some points. And 21, 24, 27 even, probably not going to be enough unless it just all comes together perfectly and you have this like weird, amazing outing that we haven't seen forever.
Get a special team score, get a defensive score.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot this week with the coaches about the ability to avoid turnovers, I guess. And I mean, how realistic is that continues? I mean, they've got 0 through 2 games, and I think they're one of 8 teams in the country that's, at least in FBS, that's got that. I mean, is that something that's just kind of been, well, they've caught a couple of breaks? I mean, but they've only put 1 on the ground, I think, right? I mean, no picks, and they 1 fumble but got it back. I mean, how realistic is it that this could be a little bit of this team's identity? And my God, if that's the case, that's going to help you stay in games. You may not win a bunch. You probably won't, but you can compete if you don't beat yourself. And that's obviously something they're off to a good start in.
I think we're going to see Jason Bean challenged a little bit more this week than he has been so far, because the Baylor secondary does have experienced guys. I mean, it's not going to be the same as what you've seen the past couple of weeks. So maybe some of the things that he was able to get away with against South Dakota and against Coastal Carolina, you're not this week.
Sure.
So I think this should be kind of a good litmus test for where he's at, because, you know, obviously he played previously at North Texas, and, you know, he wasn't turnover free in those games, but I think he has gotten better as a quarterback since then. And, you know, when you're facing a experienced Baylor secondary, if you can get through this game without an interception too, hey, I think you're doing something. I think that's a great sign for this offense and where it's going. And I mean, we'll see how it plays out. If you're playing catch up, you might have to have him kind of airing the ball out and that type of stuff. But this offense is at its best when, you know, he's kind of scrambling and making stuff happen with his feet too. So I think that probably also helps him maybe keep down some of those interception opportunities and that type of thing. Just he's become such a good runner out of the backfield.
Yeah, I like what you said there. It made me think of something though. When you look at what Baylor did against Texas State and Texas Southern, and Andy Kotelnicki said it too. I mean, they didn't show too much, or I'm sorry, Borland did. They didn't show too much. So he's expecting to see some things he hasn't seen, and he tried to go back and watch last year's film, because that was Aranda's first year, right? And so, Aranda's first year. And so they're trying, they're preparing for everything, but there's still going to be some new wrinkles that that this defense hasn't seen with that Baylor offense, just because number one, it's still new to Baylor, but it's also this coaching staff's brand new here too. So my question though, the thing that made me think of was, do you get a sense for how much of that could benefit Kansas too? Do you think everything's in? Do you think that it's possible that they're holding some stuff back still, or do you think they've put everything in? And I know that game plans vary from week to week, and there are wrinkles on everything you do. But as far as just what they do and the type of team they are and big packages, do you think there's any surprises left in the tank, or is this what we've seen is what they've got?
I mean, I think there might be, a couple of little surprises, but I don't think it'll probably be as drastic as what Baylor was able to do.
Right. Right.
Baylor was able to come out and win a couple games second one pretty easily too, against a team that didn't have a chance against it. And, KU hasn't had that luxury just because of where they're at as a program. So
because of scheduling, what does KU have to do to get Texas State and Texas Southern on the schedule back to back? I mean, that would be helpful. Like this was a thing, right? Back in the day, in the 90s, even when Bill Snyder was building K-State, they played the worst schools imaginable 4 times in a row out of the gate. And we're 4-0 every year. And it was an embarrassment. And it was Cupcake City. And they got ridiculed for it and all that. But guess what? They won them all. Then they went and won a couple more somehow, and they're a bowl team. And then they kept doing that. And then, it built from there. So, I don't know. They got some bad luck with the Coastal Carolina thing, of course. Nobody knew that was going to happen. But you look ahead, Houston's on KU's non-con schedule coming up. Now, maybe those will be conference games. So they may have to totally redo it anyway. But there you go. If Houston is now a conference team on those future schedules, let's go. Put those crappy teams in there and benefit from that. And you got to beat them. That's part of it too. They've had their own struggles with South Dakota State, SEMO, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not saying it's a given that KU would have won those games, but you'd definitely rather have Texas State and Texas Southern on your schedule than South Dakota and Coastal, period. Yeah. So we'll see. Well, hey, before we get out of here, let's finish it up. I won't make you pick a score. I know you got some work to do there, but
I'll put it on mine. I'll put it on mine with my little game preview.
There you go. Okay, good. Well, do you have enough of a gut feeling right now then, before they see your score, to tell the people listening and to tell me, frankly, if this is a game? Can Kansas be in this game? Do you feel like that's coming, or do you feel like this is going to be that 61-7 or whatever it was?
No, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I will say that. It might be one of those games that, kind of like last week where, it's manageable. It's maybe doable in the third quarter, but, maybe fourth quarter, you get a little bit of separation and you just come out short. But to me, what's the line at now? About 17.5, somewhere around there.
Right.
I think they can be closer than that. I don't think they're going to beat Baylor, but it wouldn't be a shocking moment if they were to pull off an upset. I don't think it's that crazy to think about. But yeah, I think it'll be competitive. I think it should be, it might be an entertaining Big 12 game for a change. There definitely weren't any of those last year, at least not until the last week of the season. So I think fans will probably leave the game happy regardless of the outcome, because I think that they'll see a well-prepared team and probably a game that's, within reach in the second half. And think about last year and how many week after week, just huge blowouts. So
rake those leaves, buddy. That was last year's slogan. This year, maybe not. Put the rake away for a while. And, but yeah, I tend to agree, man. I think you're right. And if you look at the schedule, be careful with this, but Baylor and Duke, that's 2 of your probably most winnable games the rest of the way.
That's true.
The bad news about it being kind of front loaded like this is it means it gets really hard and really ugly the rest of the way. You still have Texas Tech in there that may or may not be good. Obviously a couple others that could fall in that same category, sort of like Baylor is, but this one's at home. It's early. Baylor hasn't looked incredible against really anybody of consequence, and KU's starting to build its identity. So I think that these next 2 games are really important for that. if they're competitive, then I think fans will say, this could be a fun year. Regardless, win or lose, this could be a fun year. We just want to see our team compete. If they're not, then what's coming is only going to get worse, and then the job's harder. There's no question about it. So for that reason, it's massive. But take some solace in the fact that Vegas doesn't miss very often at all. And so if Vegas thinks this is a 14 or 17 point game, maybe it will be, or maybe like you said, they'll beat it by a touchdown or something like that. But I mean, that's how close they were at Coastal Carolina, right? The Velton Gardner dropped fourth down pass. They weren't going to win the game if he caught that pass, but I think they probably would have lost by 2 touchdowns then, right? If that continue that drive, go get some points and keep that pressure on. That might have been the difference between an easy cover and looking like it was a 49 to 35 game or something versus 49 to 2022. So
and then obviously the block punt that was a touchdown for Coastal was huge too. So Lance Leipold has brought this up this week. They only punted twice. They didn't turn the ball over. I mean, ultimately it's the final score is not what you want by any means, but I mean those are good signs that you went on the road, you only had to punt twice, and you were aggressive on fourth downs, and to me those are small positives. And I don't think they're looking for moral victories, but that there are little signs of progress.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to him. That's incredible, especially 2 games into your time at Kansas. I mean, that's not very many teams have lost by 27 when punting twice and not turning it over. Usually that's a recipe for a bunch of bad mistakes and turnovers. And what's that go back to? The start of the season, right? The preseason, where Kotelnicki said, we want to eliminate bad football. That's a good sign that they're maybe headed toward that direction. So we won't know if that's the case until they start playing some of these Big 12 opponents, and that starts this week. This game couldn't get much bigger. It's big for a lot of reasons, and what's crazy is if they found a way to pull the upset, then they're 2-1. When's the last time you heard that? Doesn't that sound like a
2 years ago, right? Yeah. Les Miles' first year, they beat Indiana State, lost to Coastal, won at Boston College. Shocking.
Oh yeah, 2-1. I was probably marveling about it on a podcast back then.
You were. A lot's happened since then. So
Good point. Yeah, that's 2 years. It feels like 20. But anyway, yeah, it's a big weekend and it's a great game time. I'm really interested to see what the crowd looks like. They were great week 1. They showed up. They did their part. The administration, Travis Goff, the coaches, the players, they all said that. Like that was electric. That's what we need. Thank you. I mean, they didn't even gloss over that at all. They were really appreciative of what that crowd was like. So does it look like that again? I think it will. I do. I think this fan base has a different vibe around it right now. I think they believe in these guys on a different level than we've seen in a long time. And I think that's why, again, this game's important, because if you go out and put a good product on the field and show that you're competitive, then they might come back again, once you play your next home Big 12 game. And if you don't, it's easy for them to just kind of do that PTSD thing and say, I'm done. I don't want to do this again. So big game for a lot of reasons. Benton will be there. I'll be there. We'll have all kinds of coverage at KUsports.com. And of course, before that, you can look for Benton's official score prediction and his preview stuff at KUsports.com. But a lot of good football stuff up right now. He brought the 5 questions back this year, which we didn't get a chance to do last year because of COVID. That's always been one of my favorite features that we do on the sort of around game day. And you've had Jason Bean and Dirk Nowitzki and Kyron this week, right?
Yep, Kyron this week. Yeah,
so
got the Dirk Nowitzki to kick it off this year.
Who ever thought Dirk Nowitzki would care about KU football?
Oh, it's crazy.
Especially when he's got Luka to keep him busy. So anyway, we'll end there before it gets even more NBA centric. But for Benton Smith, I'm Matt Tate. This was the KU Sports Hour. Thanks for hopping along with us, everyone, and take care of yourselves. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game if you're checking it out. And we'll talk to you guys again real soon.